Alright, so once your bowls have set up and become leather hard, you should notice that there's still a fair amount of pliability. This bowl can become oval without cracking the lip, and it's important to have a little bit of give just so you don't damage the rim. Notice that there's some softness here. I can compress that edge and it reacts with a little bit of pressure. You can still smear it. This is also a really good opportunity to really look at the curve inside. This bowl has been made with a really great attention to that continuous curve. I would say that the center, way down in the bottom there, is a little bit low, and so you can always make some adjustments even before you put it upside down. This is a good one too. So if you feel like there's like a well down in the bottom here, give it a couple of taps. I might even put it on the wheel and drop an elbow. Turn it. And just taking advantage of that flexibility right now, you can always make some adjustments. So here I've adjusted the very center of that curve to be more in line with this continuous curve that's inside this bowl. So the next step is to remove a lot of this extra clay. We want to achieve an even wall thickness, so run your fingers and thumb along the wall and try to figure out where it begins to become thicker. So right in here is where this wall starts to flare out and become thicker. Down here I have a good 1/2 inch floor, even with that compression. But my foot ring, try to create a diameter on your foot ring that's about 1/3 the diameter of the lip. And I'll show you what I mean by that once I get this bowl centered. So I'll adjust the camera so you have more of an aerial perspective here, so you can see what I'm talking about. The tools that you'll need are just part of what's in your packet. The additional tool that I like is just grabbing yourself a cap. It can be a small diameter cap. I like the ones that have the little clicker. So a Snapple, Tazo tea, Starbucks coffee drinks, they all come with this little clicker on them. I'll show you how that works. So first, give yourself the advantage of locating the center of the wheel by checking out these circles that they give you, and put this bowl in the middle of a circle. That should be pretty close to center as it is. Now this bowl has got some slight variations, which most bowls will have. So in which case you want to identify that. This needle tool is marking the side wall. I'm holding the needle tool very still. Notice my hands are resting on the splash pan. So the needle is not moving and the bowl is. And if I slow that down, you'll see that it has marked this side of the bowl. Here's the end of that mark as it passed by. Here's the beginning of the mark as it passed by. So here's the center of that mark. I'll turn the mark towards myself. Now I'm going to scoot the bowl towards the center of the wheel just a little bit. It's not far off. So that was maybe 1 millimeter, and I can check it again. Let's see if I made a difference. So it's making a much longer line now. The line almost went around the bowl. So the only place that line, so here's the beginning of that new line. It's very faint right there. And here's the end of that new line. So it's almost there. Once the line goes all the way around the bowl, you're pretty much good. So I'm going to face that line towards myself. Here's the center of the line. And I'm going to scoot that bowl just another tiny little bit. That was maybe 1/2 millimeter. So we'll check it again. You know, I made that thumb mark where the bowl's wall becomes a little bit thicker. So I'm trying to make these needle tool marks in a place where I know I'm going to trim it. So that bowl is more or less centered. There's just a little bit of a need to shift it maybe. That last line is very faint on this side and it's a little deeper on this side. So I'm going to face that deeper part of that line towards myself and scoot it away from myself, thereby pushing it closer and closer to the center of the wheel. And once it's there, you know, that looks pretty good all over this place. Once it's there, I want to keep it there. So give yourself a little bit of clay, roll this coil so that you can break this into 3 parts. I like to put 3 lugs around this. I'm going to keep the bowl positioned where I've just placed it, and then fasten these coils to the wheel. Notice I'm pushing the coil down into the wheel head, and I'm letting that soft edge mush into the side of the lip. It doesn't need to be smashed into the pot. It needs to be stuck to the wheel. That's going to keep this bowl from shifting side to side. This bottle cap is what I like to use to keep the bowl pushed onto the wheel. When you're carving with these tools, they tend to want to pull the bowl up. So this helps keep the bowl down. A lot of people that don't use a bottle cap would naturally rest their hand on the bottom of the form. But if the form is super soft, you're going to push that floor down. So this helps spread the pressure over a larger area, and you're less likely to collapse the floor. I also like the bottle cap because it's a place for my left hand to rest, where I can interconnect my left and right hands, and I'm gonna have greater control of my tool when I use both of my hands versus just one of my hands. So back to the diameter of the foot. I was mentioning if the lip, let's say, is 6 inches, then the diameter of my foot's going to be 2 inches, because 2 is 1/3 of 6. But you don't need a calculator and a ruler. If you just kind of guess, like, let's guess, maybe this is 1/3, but you don't really know. So measure the diameter of your guess. So that's the diameter from one edge of that circle to the other as the line passes through the center. Now if I place this end here and drop a straight line down from my finger, notice that that tool is touching the wheel just outside of my lip. So this is 1, 2, 3. Just by eyeballing this, I can tell that the diameter that I've just guessed is a lot larger than 1/3. So I'm going to adjust. And I can just smear that line and make a new one. So hold that needle tool really still. Let's see what this does. So there's 1, 2. You really only need to measure one side. Ooh, look at that. That's about 1/3. Because here's 1, 2, 3. So this circle is 1/3 the diameter of the circle at the top of my form. It's a good proportion. It's a, you know, you can use that 1/3 proportion in just about anything that you compose. So now that bottle cap's just going to sit right in the center of that little circle, and I'm going to rest my finger of my left hand on that, and I'm putting pressure down. You can hear the clicker. I like to use this big tool first because I have a lot of clay to remove right here. I'm going to cut all this clay away up to that circle. And a real great idea is to just start in a downward motion, because I have the wheel head down there to support that. And you can use either end of this. I'm going to dig in with this bigger end of the loop. And I like to hold that handle in my hand with my fingertip on the blade. And I'm just going to kind of roll that down and in there, holding this bowl pinned to the wheel. So the tendency for this blade is to cut deep, or it's either going to want to pull the bowl up. So you really need to get sturdy. Like, my arms are resting on my thighs, my hands touching here, my fingers are both hands touching this blade. And what you want to see is like these ribbons just peeling off of you. Now, part of this assignment is to throw a bowl that has a continuous curve on the inside. And that's that way for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is right now it's a dome shape. It's upside down. It's a very sturdy shape. It's one of the strongest shapes. It's a curve this way and a curve this way. So I want to see that form that's inside become reflected in the outer shape. So I know that I have a little bit of a thicker wall starting around here. I'm going to take those needle tool marks off, and I'm really just focusing on creating the shape of that curve out here right now. And a lot of times this is the area where you really need to focus and take a lot of the clay off in here. So I'm going to dive down a little deeper with this narrow end, and then feather that out a little bit. So I think I'm starting to identify visually the shape on the outside that seems very similar to what I remember the shape of the inside to be. So now that I feel like I'm becoming thinner, or at least the same thickness here as I am here, now I'll just double check that. So you can fling all those trimmings away. This is a great little trick. If you ever need to double check, put a little mark on your soft clay, and then put a little mark on your bowl. Now I can remove these two temporarily, leave that one, and now pick this bowl up and feel the wall. And ask yourself, is that wall the same thickness up on the top as it is down on the bottom? And a lot of times you're going to say no, in which case you'll need to recenter this. Well, instead of going through all of the process that I just showed you, you can simply put this mark back down in line with that mark, and it's a quick way to bring this bowl right back to the center of the wheel again without spending too much time worrying about it. Just roll those coils back and stick them down again. Still centered. So when I felt that wall, it still seemed like I can remove some thickness from here. So I'm just going to start here and just get a little bit deeper as I go towards my foot. You can even, dive down here if you want. Right outside this foot ring, this is usually where you're going to have to really focus and take more than you think. So now, I'm not going to pick it up again. I think I've done a better job now after that first try. So the next thing to think about is, how do you want this foot to be? Do you want it straight up and down? Do you want it at an angle? Do you want it smooth? Do you want there to be texture? What kind of texture? Lines? It's a wonderful detail that you want to think about and create something that complements the form. So this form is a very smooth shape. It's a very round curve. The lip has got no lines. It's a very smooth lip. So I think I'm just going to round this off to kind of soften the shape of that to mimic this nice round curve here. So the end of this tool can really help define these angles. Oh, here's a little trick. If you're throwing with a mask on, it's impossible to blow these little parts off of here. So just have a dry brush handy and you can brush the little parts away. Okay, so now that I've kind of defined a shape and a texture and a line here that I think complements this shape, now I'm going to try to make this foot ring the same thickness as my bowl, and I'm going to make the top of this ring look like the top of this ring. So inside, I'm going to just rotate the end of this tool straight down into the floor. And a good way to do that, is maybe give yourself a line here. So I don't want to take any clay in here. I want to take the clay in here. And I want this curve to pass through this foot ring and be seen inside that. So I'm just going to go straight down on the edge of this line first. So I'm resting my left forearm on my left thigh. I'm resting my right forearm on my right thigh. And I'm just going to dig straight down until I'm deep as I am here. And once you think you're pretty close, then you can take the center part out. Okay, so again, I want this shape to be continued through this ring. So now I'm just going to take care of some of the details again with this tool. And now I just have a little bit to remove right here in the center. So this is actually a lot thicker than the lip of this bowl. So I'm just going to barely shave a little bit of clay off the inner edge here to try and create a ring that's similar to the thickness of my lip. This clay's a little soft, so that's kind of sticking in there. There we go. You don't want to let this clay get too dry though. The worst is trimming a bone dry bowl. You don't even want to try that unless you have power tools. Okay, So now that I've achieved a depth in here that's the same elevation inside as it is outside, I'm just again gonna like clean up that detail a little bit. And make sure this shape inside is just slightly lower on the outside of this ring and just slightly higher at the center, thereby, you know, shaping the contour to match the curve of this dome. And what that's going to do, if I can make this outside dome look like the inside curve, then the wall thickness becomes the same. So that's pretty close. You know, this curve just passes right through that ring. Now, this ring is about the same thickness as this lip. The profile of this shape is almost matching the profile of this shape. You have so many options about how you can do this. That's just one way I can approach this bowl. So now, before I just take this off the wheel, notice that this foot kind of undulates a little bit. I can use this to flatten that out. I could have flattened that out in the beginning even, or you could simply use this needle tool, which a lot of you have been practicing during your cylinders, and I'm just going to cut this level. So if I hold this needle really still and pass it through, it's going to just shave a very thin layer off, but it's going to make a level cut. So I'm going to take this hard edge off here. Take this hard edge off here. So now the very last thing is to pay attention to the texture and contour of the actual bottom. It's flat now, but it could be smooth. This is one tool that can smooth that out. And rather than making it flat and smooth, remember how the cylinders, before you fire them, you roll and tap the bottom of a cylinder? And that contours the edge of that floor to lift up off of the surface that it sits on. And this is important for a lot of different reasons. This is first making this really smooth. It's not going to scratch your tables and countertops while it's being used for the years that it's going to be used. It's not going to chip very easy because you can bump this in all sorts of directions and it won't shatter or chip this edge. And it's also visually lifting it up off the ground with a little shadow that's going to be under there. But when it comes time to glaze, I can glaze this form all the way down to this edge I've created, and that glaze won't even touch the kiln shelf in the firing. Okay? I just looked at the camera, and I think this foot ring looks really big still. So before I take this off the wheel, I'm going to take some of the thickness away. Another tool, you know, if you're using these tools and you don't have your metal rib, you can just burnish with this. Be quick and easy. So it's smoothing and just slightly rounding that edge. And that's pretty much it for now. I guess the very last thing I would like to encourage, if you're gonna set it on a board, make sure this board is first of all flat, and then secondly, make sure that it doesn't have a bunch of crumbs on it. If there's all sorts of dry clay on here and you put this nice foot on that, then this is going to pick up whatever you set it on. So just, you know, wipe this off if it's dirty. I'm just going to smear that mark back together. Yeah, that's a nice even wall. It's a good durable foot. Nice smooth and rounded. Good proportions. 1/3 of this. Clean wear board. Voila. Whoa. Here's the angle.